Assalamu alaikum all my students. I hope you are fine. That's good. Well, I hope that you can recall what we've done in session number 17. I hope you remember that we tried to understand all the traditional 44 sounds of English, and at the same time we tried to understand the basic differences between phonetics and phonology as the two branches of linguistics. I told you that it's imperative to understand the symbol or the sign of each and every phoneme if you want to understand the world of phonetics and phonology, particularly phonology, because I'm talking about phonemes of English. And that's why I try to separate first of all the consonants and then of course the vowels, but I picked up first of all the vowels in the previous session, and afterwards we talked about consonant sounds of English. At the same time, I tried to provide you with a simple activity that when you just write some symbol, you must produce the sound of that symbol, at the same time some keywords, and I tried to underline that part of the word where you can find one particular sound. So I hope that now you are in the position to understand all the 44 sounds of English, but remember, time and again I have to bring that very component into different sessions, maybe session number 17 or some other sessions, the coming sessions, because it's very important. You should be knowing the entire of the traditional sounds of English, and the symbols of each and every sound is very important, because you should be understanding that how to write that symbol, and then after writing you should be knowing to produce the sound. If somebody puts you a question or write down ing, you should be able to write ing, and you should be able to pronounce the sound ing. That's very important, because now we are in the little more technical part of our course, and we have to practice the things by speaking. I'm not saying that phonetics and phonology primarily, these two branches talk about the spoken version of the language. This is misconception, and sometimes there are questions from the students. And my answer is not at all, because you have to write everything. It's very important. So both the written version and at the same time the spoken version of English language we must be understanding. So please, if there is some sort of misconception about that, so you have to now understand, no, it is not like that, that we are only concerned with the spoken version of English language, not at all. Okay, so today is our session number 18, so I welcome to session number 18. Well, there is one question that was raised by one student, that when I see the first slide, the word program, P-R-O-G-R-A-M-M-E, program, why it is not P-R-O-G-R-A-M. So it's very important to understand that this word P-R-O-G-R-A-M-M-E primarily reflects British English. So far as P-R-O-G-R-A-M is concerned, that reflects American English. Okay, so I told you, still remember, and time and again I tell you that the model which I try my level best to present before you is the British model, but you're free to speak any type of English. That could be American English, and if you know what is Australian English, you can even speak that English. That makes no difference at all, but the basic concepts are the same, right? So you have to understand the concepts first of all, and then you have to go for the pronunciation, or one particular pronunciation. Is it clear? Okay, as I told you, this is session number 18, so welcome all to session number 18. And now we are getting close to the end of our program. Of course, still more sessions to come, but many things to talk about. So let's see what we have for session number 18. Well, in session number 18 we have got 5 areas to talk about, but we'll be talking about in detail. So far as the first 4 areas are concerned, we'll be touching upon only the 5th area, that is the features of pronunciation. We have to take up this very part in the next session in detail, but today we have to talk about, first of all, What's phonology? Now we have to answer ourselves that what's phonology and how is speech possible, and then we shall be talking about 7 main articulators, but at the same time some more will be discussed, and then we shall try to understand what is a phoneme and what are phonemes. So I hope that we shall be talking about in detail so far as the first 4 topics are concerned, but definitely we'll be talking about features of pronunciation, since we have to take up this particular part in detail in the coming session. So that's why I shall be talking about this, but I shall be just giving a passing reference to this area. All right, so let's start our work, that is the work of session number 18. Before I say anything else, I think that you are quite acquainted and familiarized with this particular slide. I presented this slide before, and I want you to understand and recall what is phonology. In fact, it's a branch of linguistics. This is what everyone knows. But at the same time, we have got 2 parts. One is what that's called phonetics. The other one is the phonemics. Now, we have to understand that what is phonetics. Of course, that is primarily based on production, or you can say articulation of speech sounds. But when we talk about phonology, we have to talk about phonemics. That is the distribution of those sounds and what is the function of those sounds, or what are the functions of those sounds. So far as phonetics world is concerned, remember there are 3 main branches and 3 main parts. One is the acoustic nature, the other one is the auditory nature, and the most significant is the articulatory nature. That means articulation, perception, and properties, right? So this is what we talked about in the early sessions. What is phonetics, and we try to understand different branches. In fact, we tried to pick it up from session number 2. Of course, session number 1, we tried to understand some of the names, but from session number 2, we tried to understand what are the details of these 3 branches of phonetics. But remember, when we talk about phonology, that is primarily based on phonemics. And what are the functions, or what is the function of each and every speech sound? So this is what we have to learn in the world of phonology. Okay? Before I introduce phonology, it's very important, my dear students, to understand what is phonetics. I'm trying to present each time a new dimension so that you may be able to understand and contrast phonetics with phonology. It's very important to understand. So it's written over here that whereas phonetics is the study of sounds and is concerned with the production, audition, and perception of speech sounds, so we call them phones. Now we understand now that phonetics is the study of sounds. What sounds? Speech sounds. What are the areas? What does it study? It studies about those speech sounds, right, with reference to their production, their audition, and perception. So that's why we call the sounds as phones. But remember, phonology describes the way sounds function, as I told you when I was talking in the previous slides. Functions. Phonology describes the way sounds function within a given language, whatever the language is, and operates at the level of sound systems and abstract sound units. Abstract sound units, that's very important to understand. I repeat, what does phonology do? If there is a question, what does it do? The answer is very simple, that it describes the way sounds function within a given language. And we are talking about phonology of English at this time. At the same time, this branch operates at the level of sound systems. What is the system of the sounds, so far as English is concerned? And abstract sound units, abstractions. So these are in the mind, that these sounds are used in the words. For example, there is a word in front of you, introduction. I am not pronouncing this word as introduction. I am not pronouncing this word as introduction. No, I am pronouncing this word as introduction. That means that I must know that what is the way to stress. I must be knowing that what is the abstraction. The abstraction in the sound, where do I have to stress, or what part of the word I have to stress. It is possible you have got only one syllabic word. For instance, there is a word door, D-O-O-R, door. It depends upon the speaker that what he wants or she wants to convey to the audience. We shall be talking about this in the coming sessions, the features of pronunciation. So that's why it is written that phonology describes the way sounds function within the given language. And the given language we have got now is English. And now we try to understand, because phonology also talks about that what is the operation of the level of sound system. So it talks about the operation of all the sounds of English. Okay? And then there is a further statement that knowing the sounds of a language is only a small part of phonology. Some people say there is a misconception among some learners that's only the sound of a language, or knowing the sound of a language is what we call phonology. Now, this is the answer. In the previous session, some of the queries were sent to me, and some of the students, they felt that does it mean that only knowing the sound of a language is phonology? So the answer is very much here. Not at all. It is a small part of phonology, right? Small part of phonology. Because this importance is shown by the fact that you can change one word into another by simply changing one sound. You can use one sound and you can change the entire meaning. Okay? For example, B-I-T, bit. Okay? Or if I say S-I-T, sit. So change of B and change of S. Just changing one sound can change the entire meaning. When I say change the meaning, that means the usage is also changed. All right? So there is a further clarification here. Let's consider differences between the words time and die. Now watch. T or T-I-M-E, time, and D-I-M-E, dime. Remember the change in T and D. For example, in the second statement, it is written, the words are identical except for the first sound T, D, can therefore distinguish words and are called contrasting sounds. Now this is what you have to understand if there is a question, what is a contrasting sound? The contrasting sound is, for example, you pick up one word and by changing one phoneme, one sound, you can bring the change in the entire meaning of the word. And of course, when I say the entire meaning of the word, that means you have to use that particular word in a sentence. So the meanings of the sentence are also changed. The entire meanings are changed. So this is what we call contrasting sounds. Contrasting sounds. Remember, there are distinctive sounds in English, and all distinctive sounds are classified as phonemes. All distinctive sounds are classified as phonemes. Do you remember when we were trying to classify the consonant sounds of English? So we try to classify according to the articulators used, according to the structure used. Do you remember? Okay, that's good. Now we understand that our phones and phonemes. When we talk about phonetics, we talk about phones. But when we talk about phonology, we talk about phonemes. So that's why the slide in front of you is phonetics, phonology interface. There are three ways, always remember, when we talk about the interface in between phonetics and phonology. What is the first one? The first one is that phonetics defines distinctive features, and then phonetics explains many phonological patterns. First, the definition, it defines the distinctive features. Second, phonetics explains many phonological patterns, and based on these two interfaces, remember, there is a constitution, what has come to be called the substantive grounding of phonology. There was a question I still remember. Substantive grounding of phonology. It is phonetics primarily that paves way to understand phonology. So finally we can say that phonetics implements phonological representations. Phonetics implements phonological representations. Of course, here we are involved in the function of language, one particular language, all right? And of course, so far as the phonemes are concerned, we use those phonemes. I am using those phonemes at this time. So each phoneme is distinctive, okay? So we are left with one thing. When I was talking about the branches, phonology, because there's a branch of linguistics. It has got phonetics and then phonemics, right? Yes, exactly. Now, what is phonemics? That's very important to understand. Remember, phonemics is the study of phonemes in their various aspects, such as their establishment, description, occurrence, arrangement, etc. But remember, primarily we must be knowing that phonemics is the study of phonemes. And what are the aspects? It talks about the aspects of all those phonemes. And may I say, how many phonemes we have now? We have got 44 traditional phonemes in English. But remember, these phonemes fall under two categories. These phonemes fall under two categories. One is the segmental part. They're also known as linear phonemes. But you must remember as segmental. 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 Yes, segmental. And the second part is suprasegmental. Suprasegmental. You can also call it non-linear phonemes, but you must focus the name suprasegmental. So we have got segmental phonology and we have suprasegmental phonology. Suprasegmental phonology. Segmental, so we know 44 traditional sounds are there. All right? So we know there are 44 traditional phonemes in English. And we write the general English into phonetic transcription. It is possible one word has got 7 letters, but when we transcribe that word, it is possible that 5 or 6 phonemes are required. But beyond that, we have to understand what is the usage of those phonemes in the words. When there is a formation of a word, we must be knowing that what is the way to use that word in a sentence. What in fact the speaker wants to convey to the audience. So that is what we call suprasegmental part of phonology. Okay? What we say phonemes, segments, and suprasegment. Segmental phonology and suprasegmental phonology. This slide can enable you to understand how is speech possible. How is speech possible? That's very important to understand. Time and again I presented before you certain diagrams elaborating various speech organs. Now you can understand what is the world inside us all the time working. Starting from larynx. What is larynx? Of course the vocal tract. The Adam's apple. Can you see an arrow? Yes, can you see an arrow? Can you see Adam's apple? That is a swollen part of your neck. That is the part that tells us whether some sound is vibrating or not vibrating. Time and again I just gave you demonstration on certain speech sounds, speech organs. And this is how the speech is possible. Alright, the starting from the larynx, of course the lungs are involved, So the airstream goes upward. So the two cavities are very important. One is the oral cavity, the other one is the nasal cavity. And inside our mouth, starting from the lips, we have got tongue, we have got teeth. But remember, it is not the only thing. We have to understand that we have got tongue. As a student of phonetics and phonology, we should be knowing what are the parts of tongue, because sometimes the tip of the tongue is working. As tongue is an active articulator, sometimes the tip of the tongue is touching various parts of our mouth, sometimes the front of the tongue, sometimes the blade, and sometimes the back of the tongue. So the entire alveolar ridge you can understand, starting from the hard ridge close to the upper teeth, and then we have got middle of that area, and then we have got a softer part, and that is called velum, right? And after understanding that, you should be knowing that there is nasal cavity. Some sounds are produced through nasal cavity. For example, ma, na, ing, ma, na, ing, ma, na, ing. But most of the sounds or the airstream is directed to the oral cavity. And you can understand now, in front of you is a complete picture or the diagram that how is speech possible. The airstream definitely from the lungs, that is pushed upward, and it is sent to the vocal tract. That is the place, you know. We also call it vocal folds. We also call it voice box. So many names are there. Is that clear? So you can recall many diagrams which you have already seen during the previous sessions. So this is how the speech is possible. Okay? When we say how is speech possible, then we have to ask ourselves, then what is phonology? Okay? If there is a question, what is phonology now? Your answer should be that the study of the sound system of languages and of the general properties displayed by these systems. We are now talking about English. You can rephrase your answer that this is the study of the sound system of English language, if we are talking about phonology of English, and of the general properties displayed by these systems. Whatever the systems of English phonology are. At the same time, we can say the systems of rules underlying the sound patterns in a language. So we can rephrase our answer, the system of rules underlying the sound patterns in English language. So what are the rules behind that? When we are using those phonemes in the connected speech. This time I'm involved in the connected speech. But when we talk to a native speaker of English, he or she may not be speaking the way I am speaking because I'm a little slower. I'm conscious about the material written on the slide. So that's why I have to elaborate the things. But when we naturally speak, for example, any native speaker naturally speaks, he or she never considers these points in his mind because he or she knows that how he is producing or how she is producing the speech sounds of our English language. If English is the target language, or if English the case we have to talk about. Same is the case with your language, that is Urdu language, for example. So the rules are there, and we know the underlying rules of our language. So we can say here that this involves knowing what sounds are and are not in the language and the rules that govern pronunciation. So we understand now what are the sounds and what are not the sounds, and what are the rules which govern the pronunciation. So that means we are talking about now English pronunciation, since we are talking about phonology of English. When we talk about any particular language, as I told you many a time, that we have to talk about phonology of English. This time we are talking about phonology of English. So we know what is the sound or what is not the sound. At any time or at any moment, if you come across any person using any sound which sounds not English, you say, oh, it's not English sound. Because now you understand, after having understood 44 traditional phonemes, and of course the triphthongs, we shall be talking about triphthongs again. You can understand, all right, this is not English sound. This is not the sound of English. You can distinguish what is the sound and what is not the sound. At the same time, you're primarily concerned with the rules which are governing the pronunciation of English. All right? By this time, you understand what is phonology. If you know what is phonology, my dear students, that means that you have got phonological knowledge. Phonological knowledge permits a speaker to. Now this is the elaboration of the first slide before this. Phonological knowledge permits a speaker to. There are four broad areas you have to understand. This knowledge permits a speaker to what? Number one, produce sounds that form meaningful utterances. Do you remember the word utterance, occurrence, all these words, meaningful utterances? I still remember in the previous sessions I had a talk on this. So phonological knowledge permits a speaker to, number one, produce sounds that form meaningful utterances. For example, n, a, b. Now three sounds are with you. N, a, b. You can call it nab, right? But if you rephrase, or you change the sequence and you say b, a, n, it becomes the word ban. Three phonemes are working. All right? You change the sequence of the phonemes, and the first sequence is n, a, b. It becomes nab. But if you change the sequence and you say b, a, n, ban. But remember, not at any case, not at all. It is bana or naba. Not at all. Because they are not words. These are not meaningful words in English. We are talking about meaningful utterances. You've got three phonemes with you, and if the sequence of these phonemes is n, a, b, so the word you can make nab. But if you change the sequence and you say b, a, n, so it becomes ban. But not at all it becomes bana or naba. So these are not meaningful utterances. Two, the phonological knowledge permits the speaker to make up new words. For example, four phonemes are in front of us. Okay? Four phonemes are in front of us. S, a, n, t. The words could be scent if this is the sequence. S, a, n, t, scent. But at the same time, if we change the sequence, it becomes tense, it becomes nets, and it becomes nest. All these four words are meaningful utterances. Okay? And then phonological knowledge permits the speaker to add appropriate phonetic segments to form plurals and past tenses. For example, plurals, books, roses. Past tense, picked, took. All right? So there is another way to understand. You can add appropriate phonetic segments. Segments. We are talking about segmental phonology. Suprasegmental, how to use those words. Okay? For example, let's take up the word nab. If it's a noun, you know what is the context you are using it in it. Okay? What is the context you want to use the word nab? But at the same time, you can use this word as a verb. So it can be used as a noun and it can be used as a verb. Okay? And if you talk about the word ban, it is a noun, but at the same time, you can use this word as a verb. Okay? So you're free. So you can make plurals, you can make the past tense, right? And then phonological knowledge permits a speaker to know what is or is not a sound in one's language. This is what I told you when I was talking and commenting during the previous slide demonstration. I told you, now you know what is an English sound and which is not an English sound. For example here, no word in English begins with the nasal ing. There is no word in English language that starts with the sound ing. If you are saying English, it does not start with ing. It starts with I sound. I. I. That is the short vowel sound. But no word in English, remember, starts with ing sound. That is nasal sound, in fact. Nasal sound. So no word in English language starts with ing sound. So if it is so that somebody is using it, you say, no, it is not possible. There is no word in English that starts with ing sound. All right? Now, you must remember, when we talk about phonology, the air stream expelled from the lungs is the most common source of energy for our vocal activity. Remember that the air stream expelled from the lungs is the most common source of energy for our vocal activity. Air stream coming from where? Expelled from the lungs. Yes, exactly. This is the most common source of energy for all vocal activities. Then, in the trachea or windpipe, it passes through the larynx, containing the vocal folds, the vocal cords. This is what I have been telling you time and again. Through the larynx, containing the vocal folds or vocal cords. Vocal cords, vocal folds. What are they? Let's understand. The front portion of the trachea windpipe is prominent in the neck below the chin and is known as Adam's apple. This is what I told you. The front portion of the trachea or windpipe is prominent in the neck below the chin. Neck below the chin. Neck below the chin, and is known as Adam's apple. So that is a spot you must remember. That is what we call vocal cords. That's what we call vocal cords. That's what we call vocal folds. All right? So that is primarily known as Adam's apple. All right? Before I talk about the 7 main articulators, my dear students, I want you to stop for the time being. You can recall all the slides which I presented during certain sessions. I'm not saying that these are the only main articulators, but remember they are main in the sense because they play the significant role. We shall be talking about not only these 7 main articulators, but definitely we'll be talking about 3 more. You might have seen all the speech organs while having detailed analysis of speech mechanism or speech organs, or about the airstream mechanism, whatever we discussed about. But I want to have some sort of elaboration. You should be knowing so far as the understanding is concerned, because you should be knowing to answer if there is a question. Write 2 lines on pharynx. What is pharynx? So let's talk about the 7 main articulators. Number 1 is the pharynx. What is it? If there is a question, what is it? The answer is, it is a tube which begins just above the larynx. It is a tube which begins just above the larynx. And then top end is divided into 2. First, it is a tube just above the larynx, and then top end is divided into 2. So what are these 2? One is the back of the mouth. The second is beginning of the way through the nasal cavity. Alright, back of the mouth and then beginning of the way through the nasal cavity. Some of the sounds, as you know, they are produced through nasal cavity. One back of the mouth, of course, the soft palate of alveolar ridge, which is also known as velum, that in fact is engaged to produce nasal sounds. So, pharynx. The second one is the velum, as I was talking about now, the soft palate. What is velum? The answer is, the velum is raised so that air cannot escape through the nose. Alright? If it is not a nasal sound, what happens? This part of our mouth is raised and it does not allow the air to escape through the nose. Rather, the air has to be escaped through the oral cavity. And then, when the tongue is in contact with the lower side of the velum, sounds which we call velar consonants such as k, g are produced. What happens? When the tongue is in contact with the lower side of the velum, sounds which are called the velar sounds or velar consonants such as k and g are produced. You can practice now, produce k sound and then g sound, so you can understand what I am saying. Alright? Our next main articulator is the hard palate. What is it? It is often called the upper roof of the mouth. What is it called? It is often called the upper roof of the mouth. And at the same time, it has smooth, curved surface. One, the upper roof of the mouth and has smooth, curved surface. The next articulator is the alveolar ridge. You can call it alveolar ridge or alveolar ridge. Remember, between the top front teeth and the hard palate. This is the entire alveolar ridge between the top front teeth and the hard palate. Surface is covered with little ridges, and sounds made by the tongue touching this area such as t and d, they are also called as alveolar sounds. Alright, sounds made by the tongue touching this area such as t and d. This time you can practice, you can say t and d. T and d. You can feel the tongue, your tongue is touching because you are producing alveolar sounds. Our next main articulator is the tongue. Number 5, the tongue. Remember, it's very important articulator, as I've been telling you time and again throughout all the sessions, that the most active part of our mouth is tongue. It is the most active articulator because it can be moved into many different places and different shapes. Yes, this time I'm talking to you, I can feel that I can move my tongue in many different places and different shapes. And what are the major parts? The major parts, the tip of the tongue, the blade, and back. So you must remember at least 3 parts. Tip of the tongue, close to tip of the tongue is the front of the tongue, but you must remember at least these 3 important parts of the tongue. Tip, blade, and back of the tongue. Okay? Well, our next articulators are teeth. The teeth. We have upper and lower teeth, upper and lower teeth, yes, these are not active articulators. Sometimes I'm saying the lower teeth, they work, right? And the sounds made with the tongue touching the front teeth, such as th and the, are called dental sounds. Okay? The teeth, our tip of the tongue is touching the inside of front two teeth and producing the sound th and the. Alright? And you already know that these sounds are called dental sounds. The seventh one is the lips, which can be pressed together to produce bilabial sounds such as p and b. Of course, m at the same time. So the lips can be pressed together to produce bilabial sounds such as p and b, and the lips can be brought into contact with teeth to produce labiodental sounds such as f and v. This is what I told you. The lower lip, definitely, the lower teeth, when the upper teeth and the lower teeth. But this time what happens, if you want to produce the sound f, you have to take the lips upward and touch the front upper teeth. Yes, that is the case with the v sound at the same time. So that's why lips can be brought into contact with teeth to produce labiodental sounds such as f and v. And at the same time, the lips can be rounded to produce lip shape for vowels like oo, oo. So now again, I repeat for you, the lips can be pressed together to produce bilabial sounds such as p and b. The lips can be brought into contact with teeth to produce labiodental sounds such as f and v, and can be rounded to produce lip shape for vowels like oo, oo. Okay? I told you that there are main articulators, which are 7 in fact, but we don't have to forget these 3 which are in front of you now. I want you to understand these 3 also. The first one is the larynx. It's a very complex and independent articulator. Remember, larynx is a very complex and independent articulator. The larynx, of course, you must know that we also have the name for larynx, that is Adam's apple. The larynx vibrates when you produce the voice sound, for example, z. Do you remember? I gave a demonstration on this, that put your finger or your thumb on the Adam's apple and produce the sound s. There is no vibration at all. But when you say zzz, you can feel the vibration. So it's a very complex and independent articulator. At the same time, the larynx vibrates when you produce the voice sound. It's not only z, but there are many other voice sounds. Can you recall how many voiced consonants we have? Yes, 15, absolutely right. And how many voiceless consonants we have? 9, exactly. And what about vowels? Yes, all vowel sounds in English are vibrating, they are voiced, absolutely. The next one is jaws. Remember, the movement of the jaws, especially the lower one, helps a lot in speaking. You might have seen the upper jaw is not moving a lot, but it is the lower jaw, you can feel it when you're talking. You can just demonstrate. You can stand in front of the mirror, you can see when you are talking, you can see there is a movement of lower jaw most of the time. I'm not saying the upper jaw does not, but remember, most of the time the lower jaw It plays its role. This is what we forget most of the time. I told you many a time that all the articulators in our mouth, of course, starting from the lips, or maybe it's the lower jaw, whatever, they are all the time contributing. Each one is contributing. Okay? And then finally we have to talk about nose and the nasal cavity. Nasal cavity. Remember, it's a very important part of our vocal apparatus of making sounds, specifically nasal sounds such as m, n, and ing. Time and again I told you we have three nasal sounds, m, n, and ing. And definitely it is the nasal cavity that plays the vital role in the production of nasal sounds. These are m, n, and ing, right? And of course, you know that what the soft part of our alveolar ridge, of course, velum, what does it do? It blocks the way, it blocks the airflow to go to oral activity, and definitely it allows the airstream to go through nasal cavity, and of course at the end of nose, that is nostrils, right, we can produce sounds like m, n, and ing. All right. Now let's focus ourselves on this slide. You have talked about, or we have talked about, 7 main articulators, at the same time 3 more. So we talked about 10 articulators. Now look at this slide and this diagram. Can you recall what we have discussed? Let's start with larynx. Yes, it is the vocal cords, the vocal folds, the voice box. It plays the significant role. And then pharynx, whatever you have read now, you can see. Uvula. Then the soft palate, the velum. Then let's talk about the alveolar ridge. You can see upper teeth are close to alveolar ridge. So there are 2 parts of alveolar ridge. The entire ridge is known as alveolar ridge, and it has 2 parts. This is what I told you in the previous slides. The hard palate and the soft palate, which is also known as velum. Then talk about tongue. Think about tongue. It has got many parts, but the 3 parts you must remember. One is the tip of the tongue, then the entire blade of the tongue, and then the back of the tongue. Then we have got upper and lower teeth. The upper teeth and the lower teeth. Then we have nose, and of course nasal cavity that ends at nose, nostrils. And we are having upper lip and lower lip. And you can also see this time jaw, the lower jaw. This time I'm talking and I can feel that my lower jaw is also moving. It is moving in accordance with the requirement of the speech, in accordance with the sounds I have to produce and I am producing. So you can have this picture in your mind all the time. What is the position of each and every speech organ, and the role we have been talking about for the last 15 to 17 sessions we have been talking about when we were engaged in classifying the consonants. At the same time we were engaged in classifying the vowel sounds, where we try to understand that the vowels are either front or the central or the back. But when we were talking about the consonant sounds of English, we tried to understand them in detail. Okay, so this is the entire picture, but this is very simple diagram. This is very simple diagram, and you must store in your minds. Okay, now this is the time to re-understand the traditional phonemes, which are 44 traditional. We have 24 consonant sounds or phonemes, out of which we have 15 voiced and 9 voiceless sounds. Then the vowels. There are total 20 vowel sounds. I'm not talking about diphthongs here. I'm only talking about 20 vowel sounds, the pure vowels and the diphthongs. Now when we try to understand, how do we understand? We should be knowing that there are 12 single vowels. You can see the sign of each and every vowel, and then we have got 5 long vowel sounds, and we have 7 short vowel sounds. 5 plus 7 is equal to 12. And then we have 8 diphthongs, double sounds, such as a, I, oi. Do you remember? Okay. So these are, you must be remembering, always remember, that we have 44 traditional phonemes. We have got 24 consonants, and then we have got 15 voiced consonants, 9 voiceless consonants, we have got 20 vowel sounds, and out of 20 we have got 12 pure vowel sounds, and then out of these 12 we have got 5 long vowel sounds, 7 short vowel sounds, and we have 8 diphthongs. Okay, we talked about the segmental and suprasegmental phonology. When we talk about features of pronunciation, that means we are referring to suprasegmental features. I am not analyzing each and every one which is in front of you, no, but I am just simply giving a passing reference. This is what I promised in the beginning of this session. Features of pronunciation. Some are there. For example, intonation, stress, word stress, sentence stress. We shall try to understand them separately, and we shall try to make a detailed analysis of each and every segment or suprasegmental feature, and some of them are in front of you, such as intonation, stress, word stress, and sentence stress. Right? Let's try to understand suprasegmental the way Professor Peter Roche, in fact, he elaborated in 2009. Let's see what does Professor Peter Roche say about this. He says, the term suprasegmental was invented to refer to aspects of sound such as intonation that did not seem to be properties of individual segments, the vowels and consonants of which speech is composed. I repeat, Peter Roche says, the term suprasegmental was invented to refer to aspects of sound such as intonation that did not seem to be properties of individual segments, like the vowels and consonants of which speech is composed. The term has tended to be used predominantly by American writers, and much British work has preferred to use the term prosodic instead. Prosody. This is what we'll be talking about. Peter Roche further says, there has never been full agreement about how many suprasegmental features are to be found in speech, but pitch, loudness, tempo, rhythm, and stress are the most commonly mentioned ones. So mark the last line, this part, when Peter Roche says that there has never been full agreement about how many suprasegmental features are to be found in speech, but pitch, loudness, tempo, rhythm, and stress are the most commonly mentioned ones. So this is what we have to talk about in the coming sessions when we shall be picking up suprasegmental features. All right? Is it clear? So before we talk about self-assessment component, it is appropriate to recall what we have done. We tried to understand phonology today. At the same time, we tried to understand how speech is possible. And of course, some of the diagrams helped us to understand that how is speech possible. At the same time, We try to understand the 7 main articulators, but along with them, we also talked about 3 more articulators. And we try to understand the location of each and every articulator or speech organ inside our mouth. What is the role and what is the shape of each and every speech organ? In other words, we can call them articulators, and they are articulators. We also try to understand the role of the most active articulator, the tongue, in fact, and the parts of tongue at the same time. One articulator, just like, for example, the lower jaw, it is all the time moving, but most of the time we forget when we are talking, when we are speaking. But since you are the student of phonetics and phonology, now you're in the better position to understand what is the role of each and every articulator during the production of speech sounds. Today also we tried to distinguish phones and phonemes, and now we are engaged in the world of phonemes, and definitely we also talked about the segment and the suprasegmental phonology. We also try to understand the opinion of Professor Peter Roche, published in 2009. What he talks about, he said there are certain things, for example, he says the major features are tone, rhythm, intonation, loudness, tempo, right? In the coming days, definitely we have to talk about these features, and I want you now, please start recording your voice. I want you to please pick up any piece of writing, from poetry, from drama, from novel, whatever the authentic material you have. Start recording your voice, start listening to yourself, and try to pronounce the words the way are to be pronounced. So let's talk about self-assessment component. Today you are required to explain phonology. Please also explain the major articulators, and tell us something about your understanding of the phonemes. You want to extend your writing. That makes no difference at all. You want to write in an elaborative way, it's okay. And then simply just mention the features of pronunciation. You don't have to jump into the detail, because I want you to know the names first of all, because one of the objectives of this phonetics and phonology, of course this course, is that you should be knowing certain terms related to phonetics or phonology, and you should be knowing now the features of pronunciation. What are they? We talked about, I presented before you, such as intonation, stress, word stress, sentence stress. You should be knowing that. And of course, when I refer to Professor Peter Roche, there are certain names over there, so you have to simply mention them. So I want you to write your answer based on these 4 areas, and please don't forget to put your answer in the written shape into the folder which I requested. I still remember I am requesting that you must generate a folder, and I'm sure that by the end of this semester, when you shall be rereading the folder or all the documents which are in the folder, you will be a different graduate. This is what I believe, and this is my belief, because I trust your talent. I believe that you're a very hard-working student, and practice is the most important thing so far as phonetics and phonology course is concerned. I want you to record your voice time and again. You're free to send me, you are free to WhatsApp me. I'm all the time with you. Definitely, if there is some problem, you can just put any question, you can raise any question, you can talk to me freely. All right, so from my side, thank you very much. We have done with the session number 18. From my side, good luck, best of wishes, stay blessed.